Budget from the part of the regular meeting. Is that how it's set up? So we'll just open the public hearing and turn it over to Rob.
All right, good evening, everyone. We've got our budget for approval tonight, and I'm going to run through a presentation for our general fund, community ed, food service, and student activities fund. About 50% of what you're going to see tonight we saw at the May meeting. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any movement at the state level. So as we talked about in May, we're building our budget based upon the governor's proposal. So there is some information related to the House and Senate, but we're really just going to focus on the governor's side of things. So I'll move through some of it pretty quickly since you've seen it 2 or 3 times at this point, but certainly ask questions along the way if you have any. So just as a refresher, the governor's proposal had a $458 per pupil foundation allowance increase for districts year over year. And then there were several categorical increases that the governor's proposed. They tied into special education, at risk, multiple ones related to retirement, and has actually increased funding for one of the categoricals related to retirement, and then some continued funding for early literacy and voc ed categoricals. As you'll recall as well, with the actuarial determination of the retirement system, the retirement rate is also up about 3% year over year as far as cost goes there. And then the bottom 2 bullet points relate to some new categoricals that were in play for 22-23 related to school safety and mental health. In the governor's proposal, she has doubled the amount of funding, but then she said that it's allocated over 2 years. So there's not an increase in funding year over year, but with her proposal, it would extend it an additional 2 years. Again, those are the Senate and House proposals. As we look at the number side of things, as it relates specifically to our district, we're going to focus on the governor's column because, again, that's where our budget is built upon. And so we start with where we're at for 22-23. So we have a $344,000 surplus in our 22-23 year. If nothing changes, we walk out the door on June 30th. We come back in on July 1st. That's our starting point for 23-24. The foundation increase of $458 that the governor's proposed equates out to about $1.4 million of additional revenue. The special ed categorical is about $41,000, and the at-risk categorical is about $27,000. The increase in the normal cost offset categorical related to retirement is estimated to be about $359,000, and it's nice that that categorical is increased because if you look down a little bit further, the estimated increase for the retirement expense is about $476,000. So although it's not completely covering that increase, it covers a large portion of that. There is a decrease in our prior year special ed categorical, and we've talked about this for the last several months. What happens is when we close out a year, there's always a 1-year lag as far as how the state trues up those costs. And we had a larger than normal increase for the 22-23 year, so this is bringing that down to historically what we typically see. Interest, as we all know, rates have increased, so we got about a $30,000 increase related to our interest income for the year. And then as we talked about as well, with the ISD funding, there's a 1-year lag as far as some of the funds that they give us related to voc ed. And a year ago, we had a position open with a voc ed teacher, and unfortunately we were able to fill that position, so it was subbed out for the year. So we had lower costs, which meant we received lower funding from the ISD in 22-23. Since that teacher's been in position this whole year, our funding for next year should equate more closely with what we've typically seen with voc ed funding. The next 4 lines all relate to wage and benefits. So it's our estimates for wage adjustments for next year, as well as steps, longevity rail increases, retirement increase, and then our benefit increases. And then the last few lines are just some small incremental increases for things related to utilities, property casualty, our teacher substitute rate, and then some dedicated funds for some strategic planning initiatives. So we've got a subtotal from that page of about 646, and then we just have a few other items to get to our bottom line total. So ESSER 3 funding, we've reflected those funds in our 22-23 year. Those are one-time funds, so we're removing the revenue from 23-24. We have 3 teacher retirements that are built into this budget. All those positions are replaced, but there is some cost savings from those retirements. And then finally, we have to remove our equalization expenditures for the year of about $613,000. That gives us a total before 11T revenue and expenditures of about $1.013 million. And what we want to do is also look at not only what our bottom line is, but are we structurally balanced because of the large influxes of one-time revenue and corresponding expenditures. So when we back out those revenues at about $1.244 million and the expenditures about $673,000, we see that we are in fact still structurally balanced at about $442,000. So on a high level, that's what our general fund budget looks like. As we start to drill a little bit deeper into it, We had board-approved revenue back in December for 22-23 at about $39.6 million. We're projecting for 23-24 to be at about $39.1 with our initial budget. Now you'll note that that's a decrease of $471,000, and you might say, well, why are we seeing a decrease in revenue if we've seen such a large overall foundation increase? And that's where this slide will get into that. It drills a little bit deeper. So our buckets of revenue are local, state, federal, and then we have an other, which is basically money we receive from the ISD. Our local revenue is up about $40,000. That's basically interest income. You'll see our state revenue is actually down about $115,000. The first 5 bullet points all tie back directly to what we saw on this slide. But the one that starts with removal of one-time MIPSR's flow-through payment of approximately $1,894,000, that wasn't reflected on the prior slide. What that was, and we talked about this at prior meetings, is the state funneled $1 billion through the schools to the retirement system to help basically make the system a little more financially secure. To do that, they can't send a check directly to the retirement system, so they have to allocate that $1 billion out to all districts. We receive the revenue, and then we have to turn around and pay the retirement system. So our revenues are grossed up by about this $1.9 million, but our expenditures are also grossed up by the same amount. So when we remove it on the revenue side, we're removing it on the expenditure side. It has a 0 impact on the bottom line, but it does impact the budget since we pulled it in for 22-23, and then we have to remove it for 23-24. So that is the largest reason why you're seeing an overall decrease in revenue. The other reason, a little bit secondary, but still fairly substantial, is on the federal revenue side. That's down about $436,000. And the main decrease there are those ESSER 3 funds that we have in the budget this year, not next year. We also have Section 98C, which were some additional one-time revenue funds. Those have a corresponding expenditure tied to them. So we'll be using those funds this year, and we'll be removing the revenue and the expenditures for next year. And we got about $100,000 budgeted for that. And then finally, our transfers and others is up about $40,000, and that's basically to account for the increased vocab ed revenue from our ISD. On the expenditure side, it's a similar story. So we have about $39.2, $39.3 million of expenditures that were approved in December. We're looking at about $38.1 with our initial 23-24 budget, which is a decrease of about $1.1 million. I'm not going to run through all these because we did that on the slide of 3 slides prior, but it gets into the benefits and some of the other adjustments. Where I really want to focus is on the bottom 2 bullet points. So the second from the bottom talks about those one-time expenditures. We'll be pulling those off as we start the 22-23 year, but we likely won't have used all of those funds. So when we get into the amendment, we'll bring back whatever's left through the amendment process. Likely the majority of the funding that's left will go into some textbook adoptions that we have planned for either 23-24 or 24-25. But what we want to do is we want to baseline our 23-24 on 0, and then when we close the books for the 22-23 year, see what we really do have left, and we'll bring it back in through the amendment process. And then the last bullet point just references those federal Section 98C funds, removing those on the expenditure side since we've removed the revenue as well. So we take all of that, we roll that into the budget format that we have for approval, and you'll see that our total revenues again are about $39.1 million. Our total expenditures are about $38.1 million. So our excess revenues over expenditures are just over $1 million. And we're projecting an ending fund balance of just under $7.5 million as of June 30th, 2024, which equates out to about a 19.6% fund balance. But I think the theme has been the last couple of years with our budgets is there's more to the story as it relates to our fund balance, and that's what this slide basically looks to do. So again, as we look at what our revenues are, we've got that $1,013,000 of excess revenue over expenditures. Again, we back out the 11T revenues and expenditures to show that we're structurally balanced at 442. But to dive a little bit deeper into what's falling to our bottom line in our fund balance, we have to look at the 11T revenues, the ESSER 3 revenues, and their corresponding expenditures. So for 22-23, we're reflecting about $1.6 million in revenues, and we've got a correspondingly about $673,000 of expenditures. On the 23-24 budget, we've got about $1.2 million of 11T only revenues with about $673,000 of expenditures. So we're projecting at June 30th, 2024, at just about $1.5 million in fund balance that we'll then use in 24-25 and 25-26 to cover our specialists, our 11T paras, and our assistant principal at the high school. And so our fund balance is looking higher than it typically would because we built up basically a bank of dollars to be able to extend those positions beyond the funding window of what we have. And so when you break that out, really our unreserved or available fund balance is about $6 million. Our assigned fund balance related to this is about $1.5 million, and we're looking at about 15.75% of unreserved fund balance and just under 4% of assigned fund balance. And that's the breakout really of our 19.6% fund balance. Any questions on that before we move on to our other funds? Okay, so community ed budget, what you're going to find with the next three budgets is they're fairly vanilla, not a lot of changes. With our community ed budget, we're not proposing any increases to our kids program rates or our preschool rates for next year. And then we've built in about $100,000 of capital outlay within our community ed budget to hopefully be able to do some improvements to our playground areas and some purchases within our classrooms. And so when you look at that budget, not a lot of change. We're looking at revenues of around $948,000, expenditures about $1,074,000, and we're projecting an ending fund balance of about $155,000, which is going to be pretty strong for a community ed fund budget. As we continue on, our food service budget is probably the one that'll look the most different, and it's because of the fact that the governor, the House, and the Senate have all proposed free meals, breakfast, and lunch for students. And so we'll be shifting local source revenue to state source as the state pays for that. We still do federally are required to calculate what our lunch rates need to be, breakfast and lunch rates, and we'll need that if a student picks up a second lunch or a second breakfast, they would have to pay for that. And when we run those calculators through, it equates to about a 10-cent increase to breakfast and lunch prices, 5 cents for milk, and 25 cents for adult meal prices. And then finally, we're continuing with our capital outlay for expenditures and the equipment needs that we have within food service. So overall, not really a lot of change. We're looking at $907,000 of revenue. We're looking at about $952,000 of expenditures. And again, strong ending fund balance position of about $227,000 in our food service fund. And then finally, our student school activity fund budget. This is really more for reference. This was something that came on because of the new accounting standard about 3 years ago. It requires us to create a budget for our student and activity funds. And so by doing that, we take an average of about what those revenues and expenditures look like every year, about $800 for both. And then we plug in our audited fund balance from the prior year, and that's the $694 with that. So unless there's any questions on any of these, that would conclude the presentation. And then I just need to note that from a property tax perspective, it's 18 mills on our operating for non-homestead, non-qualified agricultural, and then 10 mills for debt.
Thanks, Charlie. Public communications related to the budget. Bill is here to relate to the motion to adjourn. So, support. Who is supporting any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Call the regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. Thank you for joining me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You do roll, Mr. Stoddard?
Angelina Barnes.
Here.
White Hanspike.
Here.
Jason Hanselman.
Here.
Brad Stoddard here. John Tramontano.
Here.
Lisa Truscott.
Here.
And Brad Weaver.
Here.
We have it all.
Thank you. Do you have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have an agenda. Mr. Bry, you're up.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present. Thanks for the opportunity. It is, again, a privilege for me to come back and be the athletic director of my alma mater, and I don't take that lightly. I want to thank Dr. Spicker, Mr. Spagnolo, Matt Dotson, and the Board of Education for entrusting me with that responsibility. I don't take it lightly. I want to thank Sean Wade and Marie Richards for their continued support and encouragement, and certainly my assistant, Shauna Boyle, who for a 0.5 or part-time in athletics does an incredible job and handles all of our website and social media, and certainly we would not be able to do what we do and provide the services that we do to our student athletes and coaches and community and parents without her. So there's a lot of moving parts in athletics, and, you know, from facilities and reserving facilities to maintenance and grounds, transportation, use of other buildings, middle school in Herbison Woods, the technology department, as you just witnessed, our coaches, our event staff, and our trainers. So I won't go through and thank all of those individuals by name, but certainly the athletic department is not a standalone. There's a lot of moving pieces there, and certainly grateful for all of those departments and individuals that contribute to that. Not much has changed. Our enrollment is based on, so next year's enrollment was based on this year's enrollment when we do that. And so the way the MHSA does divisions, in some sports we'll actually go down a division. And so we're at 981. Nothing's changed in the division, still Class A. We still have a presence on social media, those three there. We continue to be a leader in the state in terms of hosting MHSA events. For a second there, I thought maybe we bit off more than we could chew. This fall, we hosted 5 different MHSAA sports postseason. But again, with the help of a lot of good people, we were able to manage that. But this year we hosted 266 athletic events, 32 MHSAA competitions. You can see the breakdown there by season, the number of athletic programs that we have, the number of teams that we oversee, and the number of coaches. Again, we did kind of hit, our numbers went down a little bit in terms of participation coming out of COVID, but happy to see those have increased across the board. So looking at about 830 student athletes, which was up from 26 last year. I won't go through all of this, but just so that you have an idea, what we do is charting this by class. So this year's senior class, they did not have an increase or a decrease from the previous year. From sophomores, going from sophomore to junior year, that cohort, there were 16 students that chose not to participate in athletics. So the red would be those decreases, the green would be increases, and obviously don't have anything to compare freshman class through, but we'll continue to chart that. Overall, we are up about 4%, and just before COVID, we were right around that 60% student athlete participation, so we're getting back to where it was with about 58%, and then you can see the number of male and female student athletes in terms of their participation as well. Again, same basis here, tracking those. So 3 student athletes went from 10 to 9, so down 1. You can see some of the increases there. Certainly we want to encourage multi-sport participation amongst all of our student athletes. Obviously that number will decrease the closer you get to varsity. This year we had actually one senior that was a 4-sport student athlete, lettered in both track and baseball this spring. I will tell you that we have really good student athletes, and I don't use that term lightly when I refer to them as student athletes, because they are students first. Obviously, our high academic standard, teachers pushing them in the classroom, but also making themselves available to support those student athletes who need the additional support, and our coaches, pushing the academic piece as well. But our average GPA for student athletes is 3.52. The average GPA at the high school is a 3.27. So we had 293, almost 300 student athletes that earned academic all-league. And the basis for academic all-league is a 3.5 or above. So that tells you almost 70% of our student athletes earned academic all-league. You know, it's a good problem when you go to a league meeting and you need more academic all-league certificates from the commissioner because we go through so many. And then 85% of our student athletes are above a 3-point. Again, charting those by grade, you can see what the average GPA is for each one of those, what it is for student athletes, and then we even break it down by sport. We had volleyball and I'm sorry, it was softball and soccer. The team average GPA was above a 3.9 for those sports. So again, that's the success in the classroom. Still continuing to have high expectations on the athletic field. We won 6 league championships, 9 MHSA championships was the same last year, with a total of 15. In the league, we won our first boys, won the boys league championship. That was the first in the blue since we've made that jump in the 18-19 school year, the first since 2015. Swim and dive won their 3rd consecutive. For winter sports, girls basketball won their 2nd in the blue, the first since 2019. Boys bowling won their 3rd consecutive, also the 3rd in school history. And then boys swim and dive won their 3rd consecutive. Softball won their 2nd consecutive league championship. In terms of MHSA tournament, again, football continues to really amaze at what they've been able to do. Their 7th consecutive district championship, 5th consecutive regional championship. Boys soccer won their 4th consecutive soccer or district championship, so they're rolling. Volleyball won their 2nd in Division I, and girls golf won their Division II regional championship, and that was their first since 2009. For winter sports, girls basketball won a district, hockey won their 2nd consecutive regional, and Saturday, golf finished their season. Softball had their season come to an end, so we can officially call it a wrap on athletics for the 22-23 school year. Girls soccer won their district, and softball won their 3rd consecutive district. So for the CAAC Scholar Athlete, those are our top 10 student athlete GPAs who they needed to earn a varsity letter in 2 sports their senior year. So there's 5 of them there. There's the other 5. This is extremely competitive, and I tell our student athletes, those 10, that this really is a big deal, because not only do we have high academic standards, but we also have high athletic standards. And I will tell you, of these 10, the lowest GPA was a 4.04 was the 10. So all 10 of those, and if you look at them, you've probably seen their names either in the Lansing State Journal or on the news. I mean, these aren't just members of the team. They're significant contributors on each one of their respective teams. I included this also because the MHSA for 34 years has given out Scholar Athlete Award, and it's the top 32 male and female. DeWitt had its 2nd one student athlete received that this year, and that was Abby Freshour. The first was in 2014, Nick Acabellis, if you remember him. So pretty honored that we were able to get Abby was our 2nd there. Our athletes of the year, Gabby Bry played basketball and softball, obviously meant a little more to me, and was again proud to have a front row seat to be a part of that and watch her successes. For the boys, Bryce Kearns, he's continuing his football career at Michigan Tech. Broke the scoring leader in football, was our all-time scoring career leader in basketball, both boys and girls. He surpassed the 1,000-point mark and now has the overall school record. We have 20 student athletes that at this point continuing to carry on their athletic and academics at the collegiate level. Of those 26 had above a 4 point, the average GPA of those 23.73. And if you can see the names on some of their shirts, some of those academic institutions are no slouch either. So proud of that group. Again, Shauna does almost all of our social media and does an incredible job. Just some highlights on there. As you guys probably received some phone calls in the fall about what are we doing with homecoming and this parade. So I had to include that. There were a lot of minds that were involved to kind of save homecoming, and it really, stepping back and being a member, lifetime member of this community, very proud of what took place that night. Another worth mentioning accomplishment, we believe that we had so last year the MHSA added the girls individual component to the MHSAA. We believe that this was the first all-girls duel that DeWitt competed with Fowlerville with, and so included that there. And then new all-time scoring leader, that's Bryce, past Jason Kreider, so that record stood for 27 years. Some coaching accolades. Joe Estrady, our boys soccer coach, reached the 100 milestone. Coach Zimmerman reached career win 250. Bill McCullen reached career win 500. He's the 6th among active coaches when he reached that milestone, and 15th ever in the history of the MHSAA to reach that on the girls' side. And then Scott Palmer has been 33 years here coaching basketball on both the boys and girls' side, and so he has decided that he is going to officially retire. He stepped down from teaching a couple of years ago and has now made it official from the coaching standpoint as well. I'm sure that there's probably been some concern when we passed the bond or went to the community that this was going to be a football field. And I think that all of us were very conscious to make sure that we correct that and that it is a multi-purpose. If you've been on campus this spring, you know that that was in use for events probably 4 or 5 nights a week. And certainly proud to showcase that. Our teams enjoyed it. We hosted 12 football games and the soccer game for homecoming. In the spring, we hosted 11 boys lacrosse games, 15 girls lacrosse games, 3 soccer games, and our track family was happy to be able to host some track meets, and we hosted 3 of those, one of which was a CAAC meet. So it certainly got its use this year. Another one of the things that we wanted to do was to trademark our logos, and it's not necessarily to create revenue, on royalty or anything like that, but really to protect it. And we had a community member that kind of did that as an in-kind donation. The brand identity guide is probably 13 pages, and it kind of outlines how we want the Panther to be used, but those are the logos that we had trademarked, and her volunteering to do that probably was, the total probably would have been a 5-digit cost on that, I would imagine, by all of the time and effort and everything that she did to not only create the guide, but also submit the paperwork. So we're grateful that, again, we have good community members that are willing to do that and help us out. Any questions for you? Yeah.
Just a quick one. First of all, congratulations to you again.
Thank you.
Fantastic year. Second, you mentioned toward the beginning that we were able to host more MHSAA events than we have in the past. Is that anything to do with the new field or upgrades to the facilities that we've done in Bond over the years past?
Yes, the short of it is, I think the MHSA likes DeWitt for several reasons. One, I think proximity. In the state, we hosted a last-minute Division I semifinal football game. It was a team, it was Clarkston and Caledonia, which obviously were right in the middle. We said no. They didn't accept no. We had to meet with Dr. Spickard and Mr. Spagnolo and Rick Colgrove, and they maybe reluctantly agreed to do it, so I think that's part of it. We just, bringing in business when teams are here competing, that's supporting local businesses. And then we do get a small share of the gate for hosting those, and so that's brought in additional revenue for the district. And so, I think proximity, and then the other reason we do put on a good show. They've got people that they know, or we've got people that they know they can trust and support, and aren't going to let things go sideways, so to speak. So, yeah.
I do want to go on the record to say that we had already winterized all of our facilities when they wanted to use it. So that meant bringing in, they had to bring in porta potties and things of that nature. But, that's what.
And that was no cost to the district, but
Right.
we did bring those in,
Yeah.
and
We made that a stipulation of
Yeah.
hosting the event.
So,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Good evening, folks. I need to log out and log back in. That has not always gone smoothly for me on this stage, so we'll cross our fingers. I do want to thank Dr. Strickard and the board for welcoming me to present tonight. It's always a pleasure and an honor to present to you. I believe this is the third consecutive June now, coming out of the pandemic, that we've been, by law, presenting on our benchmarking results in the spring. Those are previously. Here we go. All right. Give you a mild heart attack. All right, good. All right, so these are our spring benchmark update. Again, third year in a row for June of 2023. Just a reminder, and a lot of these slides are very similar. One, I want to keep it kind of apples to apples. I know by now, folks here at the board are frequent visitors, so the board meetings don't always need every acronym that we talk about kind of spelled out and explained. And we'll do that a little bit here, but we'll try to quickly go through those. But we do obviously broadcast this to the community, and then we post these by law to the website. So folks who would be maybe not in the know or not have that context, I want to make sure that we include those details. So again, the law passed in September of 2021. Similar requirements in the last couple of years here. You can click, this presentation will be posted on the district webpage, and all of these links are live, so if you want to go ahead and look at the different links you're able to. We're supposed to, in February and June of each year, present on our benchmark goals and our progress towards those, and that'll be posted to our district transparency site. Additionally, you heard Mr. Spagnolo talk about our 98C grant. We applied for and were granted over $100,000 this year for learning loss. And the state has told us, one of the stipulations is that we report the progress and the update directly to the state legislature, and they're still working out the mechanism for that. But we've received guidance that will be broadly similar to our annual benchmarking presentation, so I'm going to put this in here. I think this is probably going to be largely similar to what we're going to post to whatever mechanism the state ends up showing us there too. So again, if you want to look at the relevant legislation, Section 98C of Public Act 144 of last year, again, we'll have very similar updates on or reports on our progress. So benchmarking, the state approved 4 different vendors for this purpose. Many school districts, including DeWitt Public Schools, were using a vendor for benchmarking prior to this being state mandated. NWA is ours. Again, it stands for Northwest Evaluation Association. It's been used for decades in more and more schools. It says 4.5 million students used it in the last year, so it's one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name, kind of in this lane, in this area here for educational benchmarking. A note on our goals. Our goals here is to have at least 80% of our students on NWA at average or better. Obviously, that's an ambitious goal, right? Because by nature here, we're, the 50th percentile nationally would be at 50%. We want at least 80% of our kids average here. We think that we can hit that goal. When we have that 80% distribution, it allows us to make moderate intensive interventions at a kind of acceptable rate. And so all over our system, whenever we talk about our tier 1, we want 80 to 85% of kids succeeding with that tier 1 instruction. And then at that point, we have small enough groups of students who need moderate and intensive interventions. That's something that we can maintain within our system. So that seemed like a good way to do this. Therefore, our benchmark goal is 80% of our students being average or better on NWA MEEP, both math and reading. And again, so our goal being, what do we do about that? So when any of these grade levels or K-8 across the board are not there, our goal is always to close that gap. Another note, and this has been a part of the presentation since Dr. Dieter was here, he and I both agreed, we got some guidance that was saying things like, hey, our goal should be stated, we'll show growth. And we thought, that's not enough. For us here, we have higher standards than that. Students are going to grow naturally, and so we didn't feel like that was a good goal. And so we've chosen ambitious and rigorous goals. We feel like they're more clear. They're things that folks in our organization can work towards and take pride in, and it's relevant to things that teachers are doing with students every day. So that's why we didn't take the kind of easy way out and said that students here would show growth. We want them to excel all beyond that. Quickly on the labels, for our quintiles for NWEA, you'll see low, low average, average, high average, and high. That's what they correspond to nationally, to their national peers. And I will note that these are pre-pandemic norms. And we all know that schools all over the country and the world have been impacted by COVID-19 and the global pandemic. And so we always keep that in mind when we look at this, as we're comparing our 2023, 22, 23 students to studies that went on in 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 nationally pre-pandemic. In those colors you'll see, again, we look at these all over. We have lots of different reports. NWA is updating the reports and making them much more dynamic. So some of these are going to be retired over the summer, including this grade report here. And so we'll have much more usable dynamic reports. So this will be even more functional in the future. But you see how those colors correspond and how we look at, this is a grade level here. This is a 6th grade from the fall of 2018-19. You can see how we can track where students are across the grade level and kind of in the aggregate. We also have class reports, and this class report is actually one of the, is a screen grab from one of the more dynamic new reports from NWEA. This is one that teachers can get in and they can see the distribution in the class, both in math and reading. That can help them for planning groups, planning instruction, and just generally see, before they even meet their students, kind of from their scores the year before, about where their students are falling, where they can be setting goals for them. But any teacher will tell you that the distribution of performance academically in the class makes a big difference when it comes to planning, organizing the classroom, supporting students appropriately. So we think this is a very useful report for teachers. Individually, families and teachers can see student reports. We call this kind of the rainbow chart, where we can see an individual student and how they grow over time. And again, you see our red, orange, yellow, green, and blue in our quintiles. Kind of everywhere you look in NWA, that's kind of what's used, and so that's why we use it here as well. I always have done this all year long, and I know that probably teachers by now are rolling their eyes, but I think they appreciate this, that we offer perspective, a note of perspective here that these scores are a sliver of who students are, right? They represent just a portion of what we do, even academically. So science, social studies, the arts, physical fitness are not represented here. And this idea of achievement academically represents only a slice of what we do, and the DPS student experience. We just saw a lengthy and awesome presentation by our athletic director about wonderful experiences and lifelong lessons that are learned by our student athletes, which is 3 and 5 students at our high school. We could go on and on about the arts, art programs, the music, all those different things that just don't show up when we look at this kind of math and reading scores, right? So I think that's important to note. While we say keep it in perspective, we also know how we score in math and reading are really important, right? So that's, we kind of hold those two kind of opposing points as true at once and kind of move forward. I've given you, just obviously here, right, this is what the national average looks like. All of NWA, when they plot them out there, the blue, green, and yellow look like that. And so here at DeWitt, we want better than that. So when we look at these slides, that's what the reference will look like. One more note here is that when we build these quintiles, we are used to looking at our RTI triangles like we want a strong foundation. In Tier 1, the green is at the bottom, and that we're working at the margins with students who need moderate and intense interventions. And so that's why we stack it this way, which is a little bit counterintuitive, where we have the higher achieving proportions at the bottom and the lower achieving portions at the top. Lastly, this is the key. When you see SED on these graphs, that's socioeconomically disadvantaged, roughly equates to the free and reduced lunch rate within the school. SWD is students with disabilities, so these students with individualized educational plans, IEPs, special education, and then SOC is students of color. All right, so the fall to spring comparison here for this year, as you see, we start off right about this is in reading, this is K-8, which represents about 2,000 students. And we did slip a bit over the winter and did slightly gain that back, but not quite as much as we hoped. So still roughly near our goal of 80% of students at the blue, green, or average. So it would be high, average, and average. But obviously we still have a bit of growth to do there. In the math, we have a similar story. I think we've got a little bit more of a dip in the winter and a little bit more of a rebound, but did end up the year just a little bit below our goal. And again, that's what happens when we set rigorous goals. Sometimes you don't quite achieve them, but I still think that's a better idea than saying something like we're going to show growth. I will say, again, just for perspective's sake here, is that these students that we're seeing here are growing. It's just a matter of how much they're growing, right? So the vast 98% of our students grow from period to period. If we see any slip back here, it's because maybe they've grown less than cohort, national average, etc. But I will skip ahead here, and I do have some good news. We see a significant difference from spring of 22 when we talk about kind of where we're at versus this spring. And that's roughly about 3% more students at our goal rate of high average or average. And it can be, sometimes you can get lost in the numbers and 2,000 students, what does 3% of that mean? Well, I've kind of taken a look here, and when we take 3% of 2,000 students, that's 60 more students, right, that are on track, in reading here. And if you're average, high average, or high on NWA, you're statistically more likely to be career and college ready, kind of at the end of the road, proficient or highly proficient on M-STEP, and again, career and college ready on SAT when that comes. So when we think of 2 full classrooms full of students, more who are on track this year than last, I think that's a significant thing, right? So we put that in real terms, that will be 60 faces we're looking at of young people in our community who are on track this year versus last. And then the math scores here was better, but a bit more modest increase, where we had about 1% more students. There'll be about 20 more students district-wide on track in math this spring versus last spring. So again, 3% can sound like a small difference, but it's a big difference to 60 families and 60 kids in this district. 1% can seem like not much, but that's 20 students we can look in the eye and say you're on track in math. So I'm proud of the growth we've made year on year, and that's a positive trend as we emerge from pandemic learning and the effects thereof. We also, by state law, include demographic breakdowns. So this is where we see our overall, this is K-8 in reading, all the kind of yellow slides here. Light yellow are reading, all the blue slides are math, to help with simplifying all of this data. And we see how our overall students do versus our males, females, when we slice it that way. SED, again, is our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. SWD is students with disabilities. And SOC is students of color. So that's for reading. This is for math. Again, we've said this column here on the left is the same column, I'm not sure what it's, is the same column from the prior spring to spring slide. So we know that's grown. You know, overall, we've made growth spring to spring in both of these categories. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I've now broken them down by building, as I've done every spring, every winter here. Though I can show you, for example, here's Shady Road, you know, and their reading scores, and again, broken down by the demographics. Their math scores broken down by the demographics. And I will highlight a kind of point of pride here would be Scott School. You can see they're well above or just above the 80% threshold of our goal for at least average on NWEA for reading. And then for math, I believe they're sitting about 86% at our goal for either average, high average, or high performance. So special shout out to Scott Elementary for the performance here. So we can review those. The rest of those are all posted, you know, online. Won't spend a lot of time going through each one, but that's available to the public. That's available to the board. Also, this time of year is not required by law, but it also fills in kind of holistically the picture of performance when it comes to our benchmark and standardized tests. We 3 times a year give Acadians testing to students in K through 5. And Acadians gives us kind of the nuts and bolts of reading skills. NWEA does a lot of the common core pieces about how to contextualize, you know, vocabulary understanding, comprehension, application for reading. Acadians is kind of, again, this is kind of what's under the hood as far as the words per minute, accuracy, retelling, fluency. So it's, again, kind of, you can compare that to looking under the hood in the car and seeing how many RPMs students have as readers. Doesn't mean they're going to be great readers, but it gives them a great chance. And so you combine all those pieces at each grade level and you get a composite score of whether kids are at benchmark, near benchmark, above benchmark. And we track that kind of like at or above benchmark percentage very closely. And again, our goal is always 80%. And despite, you know, we have some lower scores in the first grade, which I'll address here in a minute, this is the best looking graph I've seen since I've been here, except for maybe in kindergarten where we had a little bit of a plateau, but we did make a significant jump in the percentage of students at benchmark or well above benchmark, you know, to near that 80% goal. You can see across the board we've made good growth, sometimes significant growth in different periods, and those are all the ways we want those to be moving, including, again, 4th and 5th grade, so shout out to Herbis and Woods, right, where they've got students reading at, you know, 86% of their 4th grade, 86% of their 5th grade reading at or above benchmark, and those are really high scores. Those, you know, again, you know, I talked to curriculum folks and teachers and so on all across the state and in the area, and when you talk about 86% of students at benchmark and reading, that is exceptional. So very proud of our folks, and I know working with Shady Road, we'll talk in a minute about all the hard work that the grade levels are doing to bring up those scores. That they are working hard in passing along information to the 2nd grade teachers to make sure that's a smooth transition. And hopefully, again, as we emerge from the shadow of the pandemic, we continually help these students get back on track or increase the more typical levels there too. So again, I'm no expert in this, but when I see what we've done typically in this community when it comes to this test, when I see what we're doing in K, 2, 3, 4, 5, I just have to wonder, you know, these are 6-year-olds primarily who were 3 years old when the pandemic hit. I don't know, you know, I'd be interested to see more kind of state and national information on what happened to 3-year-olds and their language development and so on. And we've, you know, done our due diligence here at school to see what we can do for them, but that is an outlier, and that's something that we're taking seriously and addressing and making sure that their transition to Scott School goes as well as it can. But overall, this is a very nice looking graph from my perspective, and I've congratulated all the buildings on making growth this year. Again, as usual, our students and staff work hard toward those goals. At the student level, they do less of looking at the big picture as far as what's our grade level or what's our class moving as far as the quintiles. And they, NWA gives them a growth goal target of a RIT score. Say I'm supposed to gain 5 points in RIT or 5 points in 9 points in RIT between winter and spring. And then teachers work with them to see if they can meet those goals. So students and teachers are focused mostly on that. But when we do meet at least 3 times a year for data review in all 5 buildings, the 4 buildings look at NWEA, we take a look at their performance. We're looking at these types of graphs to see where the grade level is, see where, and we can even break it down into 4 kind of component areas for both math and reading. To kind of drill down, like for example, in math, I know a couple of buildings had relative weaknesses in geometry. And so they were taking a hard look at where that falls in their curriculum, what they can do to kind of brush up on that throughout the year. And so they end those review days with 3 to 5 goals. They're rooted in the data. They have a rigorous process that the county helps us with. We do look for celebrations. We celebrate as we can, look for areas of growth. We seek out root causes. We do, and I was part of several this year, again, facilitated by the county, where we do protocols, one of which is called 5 Whys. I think it actually comes out of the auto industry in the 70s and 80s. But basically, and I have toddlers at home, so being asked why a lot, it seemed pretty natural. But by the time you get to 5 Whys, you've gotten to, and can't ask it anymore, you've gotten to a root cause of something. I saw some really interesting insights come out of those meetings, and based on those that data, and then solutions are hypothesized. We develop action plans and goals, and it's a really impressive process, and it shows a lot of aptitude and knowledge on the part of our staff and our leadership teams, and they're very well versed in these tests and what they mean for their individual students, their classes, their grade levels, and their buildings. And I think we're building more of a awareness of what it all adds up to district-wide as well. So I'm glad that this district got a head start on NWEA. Some districts are, are iReady, STAR assessments. There's, again, 4 different ones approved statewide. But I think that gave us a leg up when it came time that we were required by the state to do this. So again, I want to commend our staff for taking this very seriously, for the charge of recovering from whatever effects there were from the global pandemic, and kind of reestablishing our typical standards here at DeWitt Public Schools. I think we're taking a big step this year towards that. So, any questions?
Brian, thank you. It was one of my favorite presentations, so I really appreciate you putting it together. I know it's not easy, but my question is, over the past 2 summers, I believe, we've run summer school programs. What has the impact of those been? How are we kind of using those to help some of those students that need that extra help? Do you find that to be helpful, or what is the future of that?
Yeah, so that's, we've run summer school 2 summers in a row now. This will be 3 coming up, and I believe we'll have a 4th. Is that right? I can make sure I get my numbers right. Some of it can get pretty confusing. Last year, 2 years ago, the first time we ran summer school, those were state dollars that we were given. Every student was welcome, and we were paid per pupil. And so I think we had something like 600 students throughout the summer that we serviced at some point. It was an 8-week commitment. Students could opt in 2-week intervals. It was quite the undertaking. We got more qualitative feedback from that, as far as like surveying parents and so on. But we got really good, nice feedback, and nice. Parents are very happy with the offerings here. Again, there were local districts, and I don't begrudge them because it was a big lift. Not every district's got the personnel and the resources and the commitment from folks to do it. But there are districts that said no thanks. None of their students benefited from those state apportioned dollars. So we did get very good qualitative feedback. I have done some basic quantitative where I've taken those students and seen how they've progressed, and it looks good to me, but I'm not a statistician, so I would need somebody a little more seasoned than me to look at that to say definitively that 8-week summer school definitively improved scores. But I can combine kind of my homespun charts and graphs with the qualitative data that and I can say confidently that it was a positive impact on our community. And then bleeding into last year, and then this year and next year, it's a different grant funding system. We're funded through those same 11T equalization dollars under ESSER 3. And these are federal dollars, and they've been earmarked only for certain demographic subgroups. And those, it's been a little bit of an opposite situation where we identify which students are eligible based on the federal criteria, and then we look and see who's got need, and then we issue invites, and then we run it kind of that way. So it's, I think last year we serviced about 150 students rather than the 600, and it was much more modest. Again, the funding levels were such that we could run one session, one two-week session. And my kind of instruction to teachers was, hey, we've got 8 mornings. We want to be modest in our goals. I'm not saying that we can't make a difference, but it is only 8 mornings. And I said our biggest goal was not to be remedial, because we probably didn't have the time to really move the needle, specifically, but it was to make sure those students were ready. So readiness was kind of the watchword, and it was to give those 150 students who were A, eligible, and B, showed need, a leg up. I've seen success with that over the years. When you get a group of kids in early, they get comfortable with the teachers, they get comfortable with the content, that can really get them off to a good start. So that was the focus last year, and it will be this August. Invites will be going out this week to this year's cohort of students that qualify and show need, and then that'll be the focus next year, with the 3rd and final year of that federal grant.
I think the teachers, what they had noticed as far as the difference is they have students that really needed it, and they can focus on some needs for those students, and even more importantly, the after school that we've been able to do this year, because that's been consistent all year long. So it'll be interesting to take a look at how those students have done.
We did do a bit of that in the K3 realm, and we did show above average growth. That's a great point, because this is another bucket of the 11T equalization funds. We needed to spend at least 10% in after school programming as well. And so at every building, in all 5 buildings, we had at least 1 classroom of after school students with a caring adult 4 days a week, working on academic goals and kind of other kind of behavioral goals, or kind of acceptance goals and community building goals. And even at Scott School, because again, that's such a formative area and showed increased need, is that cohort of students, we ran 2 classrooms there. And when we looked at those data, we looked at their NWA scores, they were making above average growth. We did see some really good growth from the after school. So that is one, again, because of consistency, because they need so many weeks, we would expect a little more growth from them. Thank you, Dr. Spicker, for pointing that out. So, but that's kind of part and parcel, similar kind of sister program to the after school.
Thank you.
Somewhat related to that, Brian, as we looked at those bar graphs, we saw larger portions of orange and red, particularly in some of those population segments, like students with disabilities, lower socioeconomic students. Do we have goals within those groups to meet certain percentages? I know the overall is 80. Do you break it down into some of those population segments too, to try to show some growth within those?
We definitely do. I know, particularly at the secondary levels, we do that all the way down, but as a particular focus at middle school and high school, when we look at our data reviews, we will pull especially like grade distributions, and then look at them through the different lenses of our subpopulations, and have some really good and tough conversations about why that might be and what we can do to better serve students in those categories. I definitely know that when we talk about students with disabilities, that can range from students who have speech and language to someone who's got a cognitive impairment. So that encompasses a really wide range of students. And I know that each student has their own individual goals based on their specific eligibility and disability, the grade level, where they're at, etc. So we haven't done as much with that, because we know under federal law they have an advocate here at school who is tracking them. We have an IEP team that meets at least once a year to review those goals. But that's holistically and systemically. Could we? I work real closely with Kathy Gyrich, the special ed director. We're talking constantly about how students with special needs are general ed students too, and how can we incorporate the accommodations and modifications we give to those students across the board, and kind of increase an ethic, I guess, of our students are our students, right? And we need them, all students can achieve, and how do we get them to that and address their individual needs, not just in special education, but also in general education too. So I do feel like it's not the same kind of slice, but we do address those subgroups, and we do pay attention to how they're performing. Definitely. Thanks so much.
Communication for agenda items. Let's move on to consent agenda. It's the recommendation by Superintendent Shauna Spiggert, the Board of Education approve, adopt, and accept the following items for immediate implementation and appropriate action. The approval of minutes from May 8, 2023, regular meeting, special meeting on May 22nd, 2023, and the Finance Committee meeting from May 23rd, 2023. The Treasurer's report and bills for payment for the month of May 2023. Professional hires of Kara Fortin, Madison Yunker, Cody Hegesbeck, Sydney Martin, 2023 athletic workers pay and admission prices, and a few items for annual approval, including the 2023 MHSAA membership and the property tax levy of 18 and 10 mils. Do we have a motion? So moved. Support. Moved is supported. Discussion. Ms. Fortin is here.
Yes, we do have Tara Fortin here.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you guys so much. I'm really excited. I've been doing this a long time, but elementary is new to me. I do have a second, third grader myself, so I'm really excited to get started and coming from 8th grade special education in Battle Creek.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tara will be at Scott.
I do have one question. The MHSAA, this is probably for Mike who's not here. I guess I'm wondering if there's any major changes to MHSAA rules. Part of us joining is we agree to all of their rules, which are quite extensive. So I'm just wondering if there's any sort of major changes that we should know about this year.
Maybe should I get,
That's fine.
let's
Yeah,
have
I
an
just,
update.
There
we're
weren't any
obviously
major
not
changes
going,
when we,
we're going to,
brought it, but,
okay.
yeah.
I have one question also on the athletic pass increase. Each one of them increased $25 versus a percentage. Like the kids pass increased just as much as the family pass. Is that just because 25 seemed like a good number, or?
There just hasn't been any increases in several years, and so when we. What's that? At least 12 years, yeah. And so I think it was trying to get those to be more of a market value. We took a look at surrounding districts and what they did, and I think we landed on the price instead of a percentage increase.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is passed. Move on to our action items. It's the recommendation by Assistant Superintendent Rob Spagnolo and Superintendent Shauna Spiggert, the Board of Education adopt the following budgets for the 2023-2024 fiscal year for Brewer Public Schools. General fund revenues of $39,126,514,000. Community Education Fund total revenues of $948,000. Food service revenues of $907,000. Student activity fund revenue of $800,000. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Seen the presentation? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's the recommendation from Superintendent Shauna Spiggert and Assistant Superintendent Rob Spagnolo that the Board of Education approve the resolution for the 2023 Building and Site Bonds Series 2 as presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion? Anything else to add?
Frederick, I'm sure in here, give just a 30-second overview for everyone.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. You saw me back in March when you guys passed the authorizing resolution for the bonds. At that time, the stage we were at was basically your underwriter, Stephen Nicholas, was going to test the market to see if it was favorable to sell the bonds. We found a good time to do it, and that resolution made sale of bonds contingent on the recommendation of the financial advisor, PFM. PFM gave their approval and recommended that Dr. Spiggert sign the bond purchase agreement with the underwriter to sell the bonds, and so that happened. And this resolution, the 30-second version at least, is it's just to complete the transaction at the board level and approve all the work that the administration has done to get the bond sold. So with that, I just open it up to any questions if anyone has any.
Looks like none. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It's the recommendation by David Casada, Director of Casada? So close. Director of Technology and Media Services at the Board of Education approved following purchases presented by DeWitt Public Schools Technology Department. 750 Chromebooks and some other licenses, 30 Bradford charging cards, an audio system that includes 6 Bigfoot something. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but this is all part of our 2021 building and site capital project. So, anything else? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved to supported. Anything else to add? Anybody?
It fits all within the bond parameters for our tech at the ready.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It's the recommendation by Superintendent Sean Spicker that the Board of Education approve the Michigan Association of School Boards school district membership for 2023-2024 as the school year is presented. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion?
Just a quick question, Sean, in our materials it didn't say what the dues amount was. I know that it pays for itself close to 10 times over with insurance discounts.
The invoice was in there.
Yeah.
I only saw a letter and I saw what was saved, but I didn't see the
It
actual.
was in there.
So 6,420.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Finally, it's the recommendation by Superintendent Sean Spicker that the Board of Education support the nomination of John Tramontana for the remaining term to represent Region 4 on the NASB Board of Directors through January 2024. Do we have a motion?
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Anything you want to say, John?
No, this is just, I don't know how many applicants there'll be, but the person representing us in Region 4 has resigned, just given time constraints, so there's a year left on that term. So it's the final year, and Clinton County has not been represented for several decades. So,
John, who was it and where were you from?
he was in Saginaw County somewhere, and I can't tell you his name off the top of my head.
When does the term end? How long are you
It would be a year, and then eligible for 2-3 year terms.
That's great.
And you're just looking for more stuff to do.
I appreciate
Well,
it.
I think a Clinton County voice is needed there.
That's great. I'm glad you stepped up.
Appreciate that you're doing it.
Yes. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Sorry, too late.
All right, public communications for items not on the agenda.
Will Thompson?
Good evening. Last meeting, there was a lot of discussion regarding policy 7540-04, which is the staff technology acceptable use, specifically about the use of AI by both teachers and students. To me and many other people, AI is very new. In fact, many parents have probably never used it and are trying to figure out what it is. And also many parents don't even know their kids are using it to do some of their assignments right now. You know, AI is a very transformative technology that can either have an incredible benefit to everybody, or it could lead to some very negative impacts to many of us. If you do a search online, there is debate about whether or not AI will replace teachers. I think that should be really concerning to all of us, or replace a lot of us in what we do. There's a lot of discussion also about how teachers may be able to use the AI as a very valuable tool to augment what they already do, which is a great thing. But again, like I said before, I think there should be a discussion about that. How should we use it, and how is it currently being used? In addition, shouldn't parents be made aware of how it's being used in the school? Do parents even know that 7540 even exists? Quite frankly, you pass the policy, does it get communicated to the public? Do they even know it exists? There's also an active debate on how AI can make students dumber. Risks include diminished sense of problem-solving skills and critical thinking, reduction in willingness to learn and retain knowledge, students not engaged because they know they can rely on technology. We've all seen this. My kids don't know how to tell directions. They have a phone in front of them. They rely on that implicitly. They don't care where they're going because their phone tells them where to go. I think it's really dangerous for us to believe that they're going to question the outcome from some of these AI systems. Further, there are many articles out there about AI and how it can be biased. We all know we shouldn't have things that are biased out there. And again, are students really going to question it? I don't think they question technology quite enough. Truly, this is uncharted territory and possibly one of the most important issues facing us today. As a concerned parent and member of this community, I turn to you, the school board. Very capable people for leadership in the school in this very important issue. I think it's dangerous to put a vague policy out there, which 75/40 is, and again, I'm not against 75/40. It's very challenging to write a policy about this, but it's very important to back that policy up with some person, some governing body to see how it's being applied, and can we really even apply it? Can we tell when students are actually using it or not? If you look online again, some people say it's obvious, I can tell that report was written by AI. If you look at other reports, it's very difficult. So there's a lot of questions out there. As always, and I think it's important for both students and teachers to understand and have that communication with whomever that this is ethical or this is not ethical to use. Finally, as always, parents should be informed and understand how they can help their student avoid violating the policy and use AI in a positive way. Thanks. Thank you.
Superintendent, your point.
Well, we've had an amazing end of the year. We've had a lot of celebrations, events, concerts, ceremonies, field trips, field days, and more. So I was able to participate in both middle school and high school award ceremonies, attended some elementary field trips and celebrations. I raced around the district the last 2 weeks to deliver Pride Awards to all of the buildings to get those out to everyone. That's one of my favorite things to do, by the way. The showcase was a huge success, and I'd like to thank Sarah Hanks and Monica Dennings, who are the coordinators of that, and all of the volunteers that made it possible. We celebrated our retirements and years of service. Thanks to those of you who were able to attend our luncheon. And then as far as the bond, another shout out and special thanks to Herberson Woods elementary teachers who were out before the deadline, and special thanks to our maintenance crew for helping with the moving, and Clark Construction, as well as Brian Reeves, who had all really, it's been kind of a team approach to get the building ready so construction could start right away. As you know, we have a new principal posting that's out there. Corey, I would like to thank her for her service and wish her luck on her new journey. Right now, we are receiving feedback from staff and families on what they would like to see in their next principal, and as soon as the posting closes, Brian and I will host a feedback session where all of the Herberson Woods staff can come in and review application materials and kind of give their 2 cents on who they would like to see. So we hope to have that position filled for the new school year.
I thought the showcase was great. I really liked the outside stuff.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Now, this is the second year we've been able to do that, so I think we'll keep it in June. It seems to be a good time to do that. We've been lucky the last 2 years. We have had nice weather for it.
Questions, comments? Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.